Hi, and welcome to this webinar. The topic today is Twitter for executives and how you as an executive can save time in using Twitter effectively. We're strong believers in executives using Twitter much more, and we are surprised to see that it hasn't really come to that yet. There are a few very, very good examples though, and I intend to share those with you today. And having said that, I want to share my presentation with you as well. So just give me a second and I will enable that. And while I do that, please feel free to put in your questions into the question box. And I will make a stop at the end of this webinar and I will go through, in case we have time, I will go through and answer them one by one. In case we are out of time, I will answer them via mail afterwards. And I really want to respect the 30-minute limit to this webinar because I know you're all busy. So yet again, warm welcome to you. And my name is Katie Karuan, and I work at Digoshen together with my friend, peer, and colleague and co-founder, Liselott Engstam. And we help leaders and organizations remain successful in the digital age. So we are very passionate about social media as one topic, and especially Twitter, because we have seen the huge advantages for executives and board members in using Twitter. So we want to inspire more executives to either start using Twitter or level up their presence on Twitter. The agenda today, I will go through some of the myths that we are meeting when we are actually talking to people and asking them why they're not using Twitter more than they are. And we call them myths because we believe very strongly that people, executives in particular, are limiting their opportunities quite a bit by not tapping into this tool more. So we will focus on the big whys of why you should use Twitter and then immediately go down into more detail and share our experience from working with a number of executives and organizations in leveling up their Twitter presence. So what can you do now to get started and level up your presence? And finally, at the end, beyond answering questions, we will also advise you and recommend you to join some more resources that we have available for you, absolutely free of charge. So yet again, warm welcome. So let's start with the myths. And typically when we ask executives, what is it that makes you still hesitant or even reluctant to using Twitter? What they say to us is among these things. Well, it's better to let PR or communications handle it. And it's very interesting to see the shift over the years where this used to be controlled by central functions inside the corporations and organizations. And today, what we see is that the organizations and leadership teams who have enabled their leaders and talents to represent the organization and the company by using Twitter, they are attracting a lot more potential, a lot more opportunities, both in terms of business opportunities, but also in terms of new talent and interesting trends and really important insights to develop their business and survive in the digital age. So maybe in the past it was possible for PR and communications to handle it for a full organization. We strongly believe that all leaders today need to somehow tap into this tool. Well, some people still say that it's not relevant to their business, and sometimes you can probably see that there are a lot of people from the PR industry, from the press, from certain industries, and maybe not all of them are representing very visibly all different industries, but increasingly so. And I would say that any leader and executive who are inspired by others, who are interested in setting expectations, and who want to engage and tap into what's going on should be on Twitter. Doesn't mean that you have to be visible all the time, but you need to be there to listen. There are too many risks. This is something that we fully understand. And of course, there are risks in using Twitter unless you know how to use it. It's not only to communicate in 140 characters. That's something you can learn pretty quickly. But what do you communicate and how do you respond? And what is actually the way of doing communication, engaging on Twitter? And we would say that we need to shift that perspective because, of course, there are some risks and nobody wants to look stupid in front of peers or state something that could cause trouble to the market in any way. But there are many, many good role models that we can learn from and actually model on Twitter. So we should all be able to navigate through those risks to a very, very large extent. Then finally, the biggest, would say, disclaimer or the biggest obstacle to most executives that we talk to is the time. Well, whenever should I able to do this? It just seems very time consuming and I don't really see the value and the payback in time. And this is very much a myth. And this webinar will show you some examples of how you can use Twitter in a very effective way. So we strongly believe that all these 4 quotes are myths. And we want you to leave this webinar by having insights and ideas about what you can do to break through and really level up your own presence on Twitter. So if we change the perspective a little bit, and what is really the risk today of being on Twitter, or by changing that perspective, what is really the risk of not being on Twitter? Well, that would mean that if you're not communicating on social media, how would you ever be able to listen in to understand what's going on with your stakeholders, with your customers, your clients, your investors, your analysts, your potential employees, your employees, and so on and so on. There are many, many different stakeholders are present on Twitter. So the risk of not tapping into that is obvious. And it's real time, it's really, really quick. So in order to stay alert and to get the latest, this is kind of almost a mandatory tool today for a leader. However, we strongly believe that you should combine Twitter by using LinkedIn and other social media as well to get a very comprehensive set of intelligence or information at your disposal. But just if you're not part of this, you will not be able to listen into the discussions and understand what's going on. So that's a big risk as we see it. And also, as a leader, whether you are an operational executive or you are a member of a board, or you could use this to represent your various companies and organizations. And it's a very interesting way of actually getting interest from stakeholders by positioning messages and representing your various organizations. So unless you're there, you will not tap into that arena, which is almost free of charge for you. So combining that with other networking, physical networking, and so on, of course, is a very strong combination. So Twitter is great for showing what you stand for, what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, what you want to inspire other people to do more of or less of. So it's an arena that is really a very good and effective tool for you to remain in demand as a leader over time. And of course, the trends itself and what's going on, the buzz, what are they talking about? What is creating this buzz? And what do we need to listen more into? And what should we stay out of? So just by listening into what's going on, you can get a lot of insights around that. And this is something that you can do on an individual level. And of course, you will do it on an aggregated level as well inside the organization. But today, as a leader, you cannot delegate this anymore fully. We strongly believe that you need to step into this and start tapping into this and bringing this also to inspire your own organization much more. So to be cutting edge and lead the way, so to speak, also in the sharing and how you want to inspire your customers and your other stakeholders in the market. So the top 3 reasons why you need to use Twitter, beyond the obvious fact that you will find more than 300 million people there, and you will find lots of interesting things you can learn from. We'll try to summarize this in 3 different points. To learn and to listen, obviously, is the first one. It's one of my colleagues once said that it's like having a university at your disposal, because there's so much content in there, and as soon as you learn how to read the tweets and understand how you can get more content and really get the key points in the messages, you have a lot of information available that you can either digest or share or learn from. Secondly, you can also use it to set expectations. So obviously, as an executive, we need to be mindful about what type of statements we make about business, but there are very many examples of CEOs and executives who have actually set expectations about upcoming launches and new products and creating engagement and excitement about things that are coming. So it's a very good tool to set expectations, and of course, this requires that the company, the organization, is supporting you and other leaders internally in order to understand how to communicate those things and what to include and what to not include. But basically what we see is that the organizations which are equipping their employees and their leaders with the right skills to use Twitter in combination with other social media tools, they are able to create this kind of excitement and draw attention to them and really attract number of opportunities that were not on the radar before. So this is a very interesting aspect as well to why you should be there. And of course, attracting opportunities in terms of interest towards the company, organization, also for talent. Leaders and executives and potential board members are checked out regularly. You want to know who you're going to meet. You want to know who you're going to interview. You want to know who you're going to make business with. And Twitter is one of several social media platforms that are really good in sharing your dedication and your areas of interest in a trustworthy way, if you know how to do it. So these are the opportunities that you have when using Twitter. And of course, by not being there, you will lose some of that. And Twitter is so much faster than LinkedIn. So what we see is that you should use both, of course, but the combination of them is very good, because on Twitter you will have the real-time, intense trends, news, tapping into different conversations as they happen, which is really, really valuable. Whereas in LinkedIn, you will have more, I would say, stable and long-term information. Looking back, you will have a more full picture maybe of candidates or of potential partners or topics that you're going to discuss or share in groups and so on. So as a combination with LinkedIn, Twitter is the perfect match in our view. So we are moving forward now to the 5 actions that you can take. And of course, there are so many things you can do on Twitter. And I had a look through the poll before we started. So thank you for answering that. I know that some of you have not been using Twitter at all. Some of you have started, but have not really, made any progress. And some of you are starting to follow, but are not really proactively using it yet. So you have different starting points here, but I think all of you can actually benefit from all of these 5 points. And even quite experienced Twitter users could benefit from revisiting these, I would say. So let's get into that. The first one is to check your profile. And that seems kind of daunting, but it's really important to show up in a professional way and the way you want to be perceived. So by default, if you're not doing anything with your profile, you would just turn up as an egg. And of course, that's something you need to remove as soon as possible. But also, you should think about what type of engagement you want to attract. So what you put in your bio, and also how you use visuals to exemplify what you're passionate about. That's really important. So I'm going to show you one example here. And this is a CEO. His name is Hans Petter Mellerud. And as you can see here to the left, he has, in the bio below his picture, he has actually added not only where he works and that he is a CEO, but it also highlighted some hashtags, the keywords. And that's an invitation for other Twitter users to engage with him on those topics. So here he's stating, I'm interested in discussing and sharing stuff around outsourcing and cloud and HR and so on. And also, interestingly enough, he adds some personal details, right? So he loves cycling and skiing and so on. So basically, this is how he wants to use Twitter. He wants to engage on those, both very professional side and also adding a personal touch. And this is important that you think about as well, because when you start using keywords and hashtags, when you start engaging with people and following people, Twitter will try to understand your preferences. So the algorithm in Twitter will try to understand, okay, so in this case, Hans Petter Mellerud, he seems to be interested in this, so then let's suggest that he will follow these accounts and he could look into these different areas. So by being consistent in how you follow and which words you use, you will actually allow Twitter to help you get value very, very quickly from Twitter. Okay, so that was one example, and I'll going to move on now because time is running quickly here and we have 4 more points to go through. And the second thing you can do very quickly is to build your following wisely. So what do I mean by saying that? What I mean is that, again, try to be quite consistent in whom you're following. So maybe you're following people inside the organization, or you're following certain newspapers, or you're following certain authors. And maybe you're following 3 to 5 different categories of people on Twitter. That will allow Twitter to understand your preferences as well. So you will get suggestions then from Twitter what to follow more. And also it will make it easier for your Twitter followers to understand why you are there. So I would say it's difficult to keep it to 100% consistent, but I would say I'm aiming myself for like 75% being consistent within my 3 key areas. And so far, I've benefited a lot from Twitter suggesting me different topics and other accounts. So just give that a thought before you start following around. Example of this, these are 4 Twitter accounts. You can see here there's the Khan Academy and the Vanity Fair, 60 Minutes, and The Economist are all quite well-known instances. And how did I find this? Of course, I could search for them, right? But it's difficult to sit by yourself and just search for different things unless you know what to normally read on the weekend or when you have time over. But actually, I always try to look at the people whom I am inspired by. Who do they follow, right? So in this case, these 4 are actually 4 out of 55 people that is followed by Elon Musk. So you can actually choose any famous person or business leader or politician or a friend, whoever you are inspired by, and have a look at who is he or she following. And then you can, of course, model that and get inspired by that. So it's kind of a detective work where you start by following and you find a thread and suddenly you learn something new and you see something that you hadn't hadn't read before, but that seems really, really interesting. So our strong advice for you is to start by looking into your own inspirational sources. What are they doing, and how can you quickly then get access to engagement and conversations from them. Also, as a third point, what we see is that many people, and especially executives, are quite hesitant to blogging, for instance, or creating their own content, and that's totally understandable. Some of them are good at it, but I don't think it's necessary. However, the big win with social media is that you can share other people's content, and then you get associated with that content. So in case you have a special area of interest, you should find your Twitter inspirers, and you should follow them, and then you will find content that you can share to others. And by sharing with others, we mean that you either retweet directly, or that you add your own perspective or a question or a thought. Basically, that means that we have three winning parties, right? So you win because you get associated with that content, and your followers will win because they see what you're inspired by and they trust you. And thirdly, of course, the people who created this content in the first place will win as well because they get a more viral spread. So it's a very easy way to get started. It's just by sharing other people's content. And of course, over time, if you are willing to and really want to share your own content, that's brilliant as well, but it's not really necessary. So just give it a thought. Who are you inspired by, and what are they sharing, and how can you just lean onto that and make your own following based upon how you curate what they write. This is an example of one of the sources. Forbes has lots of articles and inspirational materials, and you have many of them, right? So I'm sure you have your own favorites. But it's very easy then just to click on the retweet button or add your own comment to that, and off you go. Then you are tweeting already. As a fourth point, it's really interesting to see that still many executives are missing out on listening into the conversation. So what do we mean by that? You don't have to be that visible, literally, but you need to listen in, and you can actually create your own ways of listening in. One way is, of course, to use searches on Twitter. So here I made a search in the top row here. I added WEF for World Economic Forum and sustainability as a second keyword. And this is a very simple search. You can have lots of more advanced search operators being used. But in this case, I just got a list of who is tweeting about those two keywords right now. And of course, not everything will be relevant, but probably there will be a number of great articles, interesting people to follow. And if this specific search result is interesting to you, maybe this is something that you can use on a regular basis in your work, then you can save it. So Twitter will allow you to save it, meaning that you can always go back and you can just read the search results. So you have access to a very tailored stream from Twitter. And that's all about making it simple and more effective as well. So have a play around with those keywords to see which keywords will generate interesting materials for me and which do I want to save. And then I'll come back later on to mention how you can even make it more effective in order to feed into your daily work as well. Another example of what we can do beyond searches is to use lists on Twitter to spend the time you have effectively. And lists is something that I personally, I love them because I never read my Twitter wall. I follow 1,600 people on Twitter. I never read the tweets like that. However, what I do is I use searches to search and read various threads on certain words. And then I use lists, which is a collection of Twitter accounts that I have defined myself, that is meaningful to me. So let's have a look here. 2 years ago, I was attending a conference, the Global Peter Drucker Conference, and I knew who would be the speakers, and I knew some of the people who were going to attend as participants. So I just created this list of 38 people, and here you can see an extract of this. So basically, before the event, I could tap into what they were talking about on Twitter. So I only read their tweets. Now, of course, this is their dialogue now, 2 years later. So I can still follow that list and see these people who were part of that conference. What are they up to now? And this is something that I really feel that executives and board members can benefit a lot from by really adding value and additional value from conferences, from events, and so on, by having your own, let's say, communities that you monitor and listen to and maybe engage with as well on Twitter. So this is another way of really saving time in a busy day for an executive by using Twitter. So the key questions that you should ask yourself then, I've compiled them into a few slides here just for your benefit. And the first one, you need to think about, so by whom are you inspired? Who do you want to follow on Twitter? Because that says something about you as well, right? Of course, it could be friends, it could be colleagues, but also which authors, which great business leaders, which politicians or journalists. You can follow anyone on Twitter, right? So that's up to you to be a bit creative about going maybe beyond the typical request you would send on LinkedIn. On Twitter, you can follow anyone. The second one is that you need to think about what is it that you would like to share with your professional stakeholders. So maybe you start off with one topic only, right? Maybe it's just a very professional topic. Or maybe you do as the Norwegian CEO, that he combines it with some sport activities as well. That's totally up to you. I would recommend that you do not use more than maximum 3 topics, at least in the beginning. So it stays within consistency in terms of your following and allow Twitter to help you find more interesting content in that. Thirdly, you should monitor some keywords on Twitter and save them and have them support you in your daily work. So which are the keywords? What type of keywords is it? Is it sustainability? Is it employee engagement? Is it Almedalen? Is it something else that you would like to tap into and listen to? And then set up the search and save it and monitor it. So you can easily tap into that even when you're not there. And that brings me to this point, which is one of my favorites. I know you're very busy. You can't attend any conference, and sometimes you are attending conferences. But to maximize the value, think about in the future now, if it's Almedalen in Sweden or if there's something else coming up for you shortly, who's going to speak? Do you know anyone else going there? Can you actually create a list in advance so you can tap into the engagement and maybe engage with them? Sometimes you can set up meetings in advance because you are connecting and following on Twitter. Then, of course, during the event, if you are physically attending the event, you can be sure that any conference organizer today will have their own Twitter account and their own hashtag or hashtags. So you can, of course, contribute to that. And if you can't attend, you can still tap in and listen. You can even ask questions, and you can, many times you can even get your question to be answered from stage, even though you're not in the room yourself, because you are using Twitter. So this is a fantastic opportunity for you to really be tuning into lots of events that you can't attend physically as well. And also then finally here afterwards. So like me, I love to follow up and see what they're talking about 1 or 2 years later, and sometimes something else pops up, and it's just a way of keeping certain dialogues together and also to expand my own horizon. So I would strongly recommend you to test this out for your next upcoming event and see what happens. Then the final question here, as we are running out of time almost, how can you make this part of your daily routine? And this is the key thing, because yes, it will take some time if you're starting from scratch to just create your account and feel confident about your bio and get started. But as soon as you're started, it doesn't have to take a lot of time, and it will actually save you time. Just imagine having access to search results and lists if you're going to prepare meetings, and using that information as talking points, when you meet people. I have colleagues who are brilliant at understanding what people are engaged in just by listening to Twitter. So they always have something to talk about. So our assumption is that investment you do early on will pay itself back really, really, really quickly. And then, of course, by using Twitter on your smartphone, and you can have access to third-party apps and so on, it will be even more effective. So as with all new habits, if you're not having a habit using Twitter yet, think about just like reading the morning paper, or when you're on the bus, or 15 minutes before lunch, or whatever makes sense to you. When would it be beneficial to start doing this on a regular basis? Because we know it will serve you well, and it will help you save time, and it will help you create valuable discussions, and you will listen and benefit from understanding what's going on in the world by tuning in. Okay, I'm going now to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to check if there are any questions from you guys. I hope we can continue a few more minutes here. And yes, there will be a recording. Absolutely. The recording will be available within the next hour or so. And it's possible to attend or take part of that replay, for the foreseeable future, I would say. And I have a question that I got in advance here. Which third-party apps do I recommend? Okay, this is difficult because there are so many third-party apps when it comes to Twitter. And what I would suggest is that you just need to start somewhere. I wouldn't start naming any of them, but the key thing is that whether you use TweetDeck or Hootsuite or Buffer or any of the other hundreds of different third-party apps available, it's partly preference, but also it's part of how you're going to use Twitter. This is important for you to follow different lists on a regular basis. It's important for you to quickly tweet yourself. There are different pros and cons with this, so you just need to test it out and what really serves you the best. What about analytics? How do I know when I'm doing well? Yeah, that's a very good question as well. So basically, it will take some time to build up a strong following and to get viral spread. And there are tools available to actually measure your impact on Twitter and social media. And I think that's actually a subject for another webinar, so we can come back to that more in detail. But one of them is called Clout, with a K, K-L-O-U-T, which is, I would say, a very frequently used app in order to measure your impact and how successful you are in getting a viral spread. So it's not about informing and broadcasting only. That's not really counting and giving you a lot of extra points. It's more about if you're able to create engagement, if you get retweets, and if you create discussions and you can see the engagement level going up, that will be rewarded in those algorithms. So I understand that aspect, but also I would say that Twitter itself has a very good analytics component under the settings on your account. So you can just check it out for yourself. And that means that you can actually see which tweets of yours, going back months and even years, which tweets of yours were effective, and who is your most influential follower, and so on. So by learning from what worked well in the past, you will see that you can, of course, then model that and become even more successful using Twitter. Okay, I see we are 5 minutes overdue here, so I don't want to take up any more of your time here. What I would like to say, though, if I just go back to my presentation for a short second, we are really interested in understanding more about what would be interesting for you in upcoming webinars. And we want you to suggest topics for us. So maybe there was something I shared today where you would like me to go more into detail, and we can do that in an upcoming webinar. You will find a lot of insights and inspiration totally free of charge on the Digoshen Insight platform at digoshen.com. And yeah, we would really love to understand more about what is it that would be interesting for you to get access to even more. So you're welcome to get back to us with suggestions on new topics, and we will continue these weekly webinars during the summer. And next week, we will have a focus on building thought leadership using LinkedIn